Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear participants, Assalamu alaikum. I'm pleased to be your moderator this morning. My name is Tahira Ayub and I work as an assistant professor in the Department of Health Professions Education at Shifa College of Medicine. On behalf of my department, college, Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University, and Shifa family, I welcome our respected guest speakers, audience, and faculty members. The title, Emerging Role of Blended Learning in Medical Education, itself explains the objectives of today's webinar. Before we proceed and formally begin the session, I would request Dean, Faculty of Health Sciences and Professor of Surgery, Dr. Muhammad Amir, to recite few verses from Holy Quran. Sir.
Thank you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. These are the verses from Holy Quran as a dua from Hazrat Musa. O Allah, expand my chest with assurance and ease for me my task, and untie the knot from my tongue, that they may understand my speech. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. Thank you very much.
Jazakallahu khair, sir. We take pride in the fact that Shifa College has been conducting CME activities in the form of faculty development seminars and workshops since its inception for more than 2 decades. These seminars are the hallmark of our capacity building program. Department of Health Professions Education is grateful to our leadership for their unmatched support in organizing and conducting these events successfully. With their support, even during the current pandemic, we were quickly able to switch these activities to the webinar format. I would now request the Vice Chancellor and Professor of Surgery, Dr. Muhammad Iqbal Khan, to share his vision about this webinar and introduce our honorable guest speakers. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Tahira, and it is my honor to be here today as a part of this great vision which has been started by Dr. Amin and his team about nearly 2 decades ago. Alhamdulillah, the faculty development programs, which has been successfully conducted over the period of time, is continued even in this difficult period. Today's webinar, as you know, is about the blended learning, the learning, face-to-face learning and online learning, whether it is synchronous learning or asynchronous learning. We have been accustomed with this type of learning even before the COVID period. And Shifa is privileged in the context that it has started technology-enabled learning from very beginning, inception of the institution until now. Our students are more familiar with the screens, with the gadgets, with these, with the technology than probably many other places. But still, we need a lot to learn. This COVID period was extremely difficult for us as everything was closed and we were forced to go on online. But Alhamdulillah, our team, the Department of Medical Education, and all the other departments are very well versed with the with the technology, and therefore quickly they train the faculty. They rather worked very hard to convert the possibility of online transmission of our curriculum. And we quickly devised a mechanism what curricular contents and learning objectives can be transferred online, whether synchronously or asynchronously, and what can be done on face-to-face. And at the same time, the things are developing, and we are very grateful to Professor Alam Sher from Malaysia and Professor Abel from South Africa. Basically, he is very honorable and kind person who travel all the way to join us at Shifa. And I'm honored to introduce first the Professor Alam Sher. He's a professor of pediatrics and medical educationist in the International Medical School of Management and Sciences University at Malaysia. He is a consultant pediatrician and in MSU Medical Center, Malaysia. He is a dedicated teachers, researchers, clinicians, and of premier repute and experienced administrator. In the medical education, his areas of interest are curriculum development, staff development, that's the faculty development, and the student assessments. He has published more than 70 articles, contributed chapters in the books, and has participated in national and international conferences and conducted several workshops, more than 250 workshops and webinars related to curriculum development and faculty development and the student development and student assessment around the world. And we are honored that one of our keynote speaker today will be Professor Alam Sher, and we are grateful for his time, for his ever willing to contribute. He is basically from Pakistan, and he is, alhamdulillah, well contributing back to the medical fraternity in Pakistan. Our next speaker, the other speaker, probably the first speaker, is Professor Dr. Abel. He is PhD in nursing. He is from South Africa. He is working as a career professional nurse. He is a nurse by profession and community developer and expert in educational consultants. Presently, he is working as a professor and associate dean, graduate studies and research at Shifa College of Nursing, Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University, Islamabad. He is a adjunct professor of University of Venda, Department of Psychology, South Africa as well. He is a coordinator of the PhD program at Shifa College of Nursing and is heading the graduate program and working as a research chairperson of the Indigenous Knowledge Research System. He is leading the team for the development of blended learning courses for education in Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University and other universities. So I welcome you all, and with me is Dean Professor Ahmed. Is a professor of surgery and clinician of premier repute, and is a renowned educationist in the country as well. And with this, I will request Dr. Tahira to start with the first presenter.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. We'll be having a question-answer session at the end of the presentations. All the participants are welcome to post their question in the chat box. Our first presenter, Professor Dr. Abel Pinar, has already shared a link for pre-test in the WhatsApp group. Dr. Waqas Rabbani is again going to share the link in the chat box for those who are not done with it yet. Professor Abel will start sharing his presentation once the results of the pre-test are ready. Right? I now request Professor Dr. Abel Pinar to share his experience of blended learning with us. Dr. Abel.
Dr. Abel will be speaking on blended learning, inshallah, teaching and learning.
Strategy.
Is the presentation clear to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to thank our respected VC. I think it's an honor for me to be in Pakistan. You have tapped into a talent I banked for a very long time, for years. I completed my master's in e-learning after my PhD. I first was a primary school educator and then I went into nursing, but then I continued with education after my PhD in nursing, and I never really tapped into my blended learning or online learning capacity until I was challenged by my colleagues at Shifa to develop a course in blended learning. So I would really like to thank you. In our cultural statement, we have a statement that say, to travel is to learn. Now I had to learn whilst traveling, and I'm learning still, because when we look at the constructivist view of learning, we say it's a lifelong learning. So thank you to my colleagues in Pakistan, and I would like to greet our Honorable VC and all our respected Dean of Medicine and other deans, and also my colleague that's presenting with me today, and all the colleagues from Pakistan, Malaysia, and South Africa. In South Africa, we are 6 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock. So I can say that they really did sacrifice. And thank you for the wonderful relationship that we have built, Mr. Vice Chancellor, with the university in South Africa, that they feel part of the Shifa family. And when they were invited, they immediately came in. So thank you very much. I'm continuing my presentation. Now, it's a very cold reality in education today that blended learning shifted from an elite position in education, and it has now become a necessity. Now, if we do not update our skills as educators, we are left behind. Now, the question that I'm asking this morning to all of us is, am I participating in the development of blended learning, or am I a spectator? Now, I would hope we participate, and if you could see the picture I put there, is that I'm including myself. You know, a lot of times we as professors indicate that I have been educating for a very long time. No one can teach me anything, but the COVID has really forced us to look into other measures of education and to tap into other talents. And I have learned a lot in the process of really developing the blended learning course for educators' capacity, and also to facilitate the courses to the master student and to educators both in South Africa and in Pakistan. Now, the outlay of my dialogue today, I'm going to use a conversation, a dialogue. Now, the outlay is, I have sent something for pre-reading. Now, it was just one article which you needed to pre-read, and then do the pre-test. And then this morning we meet in the dialogue. and then there's going to be a post test, and then I'm also giving you a gift of post reading just in order to establish yourself or to just look where you are in the cycle of blended learning, because it has always been there, but it has emerged now to be on the surface. Now, I just would also like to make the analogy that in blended learning, when we would like to facilitate learning, and especially to adults, it needs to be like a three-course meal. You need to give the starter, the main meal, and then the dessert. So the starter is always the pre-reading. And we have learned that you never give people a lot of articles or a lot of books to pre-read. People just simply do not have the time, because these are adult learners and they normally just do the skill in order to upskill themselves, or even if they are learners, you give a small interesting article or one interesting article or one interesting book, a short book, in order for the pre-reading. Now, I'm not sure whether you would have the pre-test results ready, Vakas. If it's ready, you can show. Otherwise, I'll just talk us through the pre-test results.
Yes, they are ready. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
And just please tell me when to scroll.
It's on now.
Yes. Can you see this shared screen?
I can see the shared screen, but it looks it's very small. If you can just enlarge it a bit for me.
Is it okay now?
It's okay now.
Or should I scroll down now?
Yes, you can scroll down. I would just like to show participants they can look through the results and interpret it for themselves. Thank you. You can go through it. Then I'll first talk us through the questions that were there. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vakas, for sharing that screen. I would just like to talk us through the question. The first question, it says that blended learning must have traditional face-to-face. Now, if you really look at the new trends or the new definition of blended learning, it says that virtual face-to-face is also face-to-face. I'm just talking us through the questions while you can read the learning outcomes for today. Then the best learning and teaching strategy remain traditional face-to-face. Well, our respected VC has already said that the students of today are more used to gadgets than during our times. So
Okay.
that one.
Can you please stop your sharing and start sharing again, because we cannot
Okay.
see the screen in
Okay.
front.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's visible now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Then blended learning is expensive. I think it speaks for itself at the current moment, and especially the systems that Shifa is using. You can stream it from a cell phone, and most students do have Android cell phones. So that one speaks for itself. Then it's impossible to learn practical. You know, we are in the health professions, medical or nursing or whatever health professions. It's impossible to learn practical through blended learning. That have tested not to be true. Then online learning might include synchronous face-to-face. Yes, that one is true, because even if you have a virtual face-to-face like we have this morning, that is called the new face-to-face. So I possibly never have to meet you in person in order to have a face-to-face education with you. So the definition of blended learning is very versatile at this stage, is whatever you blend, whether it's traditional face-to-face or whether it's online face-to-face with different facets of learning, synchronous, asynchronous. There's different recipes to blend an educational piece. Then online learning might include, I have there, then students that's actively participating shows on excellent results. We have learned through the time that that is not true, that students that might be very silent in class still show that they are silent, passive learners. It depends how much you put in on self-directed learning rather than how much you participate in class. You might be knowledgeable about the subject, but it's not necessarily indicative that when you are assessed that you are fluent in that. Then the evolution of blended learning, we know from my time that I did e-learning or online learning, we have had videos in class, we had all those things, and it actually, blended learning evolved from just having a technology in the traditional face-to-face classroom to full-blown be online, like the course that we developed at Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University. It's a full-blown online course, and we make use of virtual face-to-face rather than physical face-to-face contact. Even the small group of the students meet on a virtual face-to-face manner sometimes. So the learning outcomes, or what we need to dialogue this morning about, is to explore capacity of health professional educators in blended learning. That we've already passed with our, where we tested ourselves in the pre-test, and that we will do the post-test. Some of us have already done the post-test in order to upskill yourself. That thank you, Vakas. If there's any questions, I would like to sustain now before I move further with the learning outcomes. You can just, you'll see at the bottom of your screen there's a hand. If you put that hand, I will see it on the system, or if you make a note in the chat box, I will also see it. At the bottom of the Google Meet system, there's a hand. You just click on that hand if you want my attention, or alternatively, if you type in the chat box, I will be aware what is for. Otherwise, we can bank those questions for the question and answer session at the end. Okay, Tariq has raised a hand. You are allowed to.
Well, I cannot see any learning outcome here which is addressing the clinical skill learning or practical learning over here out of these three outcomes.
Thank you, Tariq. This lecture this morning is not focused on the clinical skills per se. It's focused on the broader focus of blended learning. But I will have a discussion at the end if you would like me to zoom into that on how do we approach clinical learning. This was not specific prepared for clinical learning. This is a broader outcome that just explore the capacity, then comprehend different approaches to enhance the generic blended learning. And then I'm going to zoom into what we have learned on the blended learning system. So thank you for your question, and I
Thank you.
will address it at the end because we have done quite substantial work as nurses because we are just as scared for clinical skills to go away. So thank you. Okay,
Thank
if
you very
there's
much.
no,
Thank you.
okay, then I'll continue. So this is a generic, and it's really just a generic. In actual fact, the whole dialogue is a starter, but I just would like to focus your attention that when we do blended learning, we then have to give a three-course meal, a starter, a main meal, and a dessert. Now, the learning outcomes, as Tariq already focused there, is explore the capacity of health professional educators, which we already done. Then the second one, comprehend different approaches to enhance learning in blended learning and mobilize diverse learning and teaching strategies to enhance blended learning competencies. And there I'm going to focus in our own blended learning module, what worked, what have we learned out of this. Now, just to have an eagle's view on our blended learning course that we have developed for STMU, there is I'm going to go through the outcomes, and Tariq, you have noted that we have specific focus on clinical or the practical portion of it. The first one is to appreciate the use of learning technologies in an educational environment. Remember, before we were challenged with COVID, STMU actually had a very good running LMS and is still having it. And we also have the Google Suite. So we were working on both the systems, but actually predominantly traditionally face-to-face. But with COVID, we were forced to move predominantly to the systems and sporadically in a face-to-face. So is to appreciate the learning technologies. And we have discovered that we can learn a lot through our LMS, through the Google Suite, and also using our different technologies, our cell phones, laptops, and whatever we have at hand to use. Then to comprehend blending and utilize the appropriate blend. As I said, that blending is not only traditional face-to-face and technologies, but it might also include virtual face-to-face, like the blended learning course we developed at Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University, which has a virtual face-to-face portion instead of the traditional face-to-face. And we have also, the blend that we have is also to look at synchronous and asynchronous approaches within our module. Now, the synchronous approach is when we have an interaction like we have today, a short dialogue, and then we have the asynchronous approach where we have communities of learning, or students or adult learners learn in groups, because we basically work with adult learners which are educators in health professions or either out of health professions. So they work in smaller groups outside the synchronous contact. We might have twice a week synchronous contact, and they have once a week an asynchronous contact where they consolidate concepts and they go into discourse in their smaller groups. And as facilitators, we might attend those smaller groups. And we had two models that we approach with. First, the group chose a leader out of themselves who leads the group. And then the second round, we appointed a master trainer who already has done the module in blended learning competencies for educators to lead the group. Now, there is advantages and disadvantages of both approaches, where the group leads themselves or where the master trainer is appointed. I will come to that later on. Then apply educational theories in blended learning. The theories that we went for is adult learning, because in adult learning, it really focuses on self-directed learning, and because these are all adults and they need to be managed with respect and also have the responsibility of learning that takes place in the self. Then we also use Kolb's experiential learning, which means that when you come to a blended learning context, you do not come tabula rasa, or you do not come empty. You come with your own knowledge. Like all of us are educators this morning, and everyone come with their own capacity or with their own knowledge. So we need to tap into that experience in order to build it further or in order to consolidate it. Then we use the connectivity theory. That's basically a hybrid from Vygotsky's theory that talks about chunking and scaffolding, which means that you have to chunk the work in such small portions when you do blended learning that it becomes understandable for the learner on the other side. Then creating a conducive context of learning using the blended learning approach. That is very important. And I wrote time there. You might not see it clearly, but time is a very important factor within blended learning. You need time to do preparation, and we need to teach we need to emphasize it to the learners to do the preparation. That is the starter, as I said. And when you come onto the main meal, you can clarify what is not clear to you within the content, and then you have to go back and focus on what you have learned. Now, except for the synchronous session, we had mandatory asynchronous sessions in small groups, a group under 10, possibly under 5, sometimes 6, where they were with a master trainer or with their own group leader, where they did the preparations for the blended learning session, or they revised what happened in the class. Then the following one is adopt a wide range of instructional strategies applicable to blended learning. We were led by the blended learners because we did not only make use of presentations, we sometimes make use of just dialogue, we make use of documents, we make use of videos, or we make use of a certain software in order to facilitate learning. So we made use of different strategies. But the main strategy was team teaching and group learning. And I'm very thankful to see that my team members, Sir Gideon Victor and Dr. Kazim, is online this morning, because we went through the learning with the first group, and then subsequent groups we manage. Now, team teaching is an approach where there is more than one facilitator. And even if we are not actively facilitating, you sit behind the scene to observe certain behaviors of the students on the synchronous set, and you then intervene when intervention is needed, or even when you need to support a colleague that's facilitating, you come in. So we were 3 that's always on the set, the one facilitating and the 2 taking a back seat, but coming in sporadically or supporting the other facilitator sporadically. So that is a team teaching. Then group learning, that's normally an asynchronous strategy where the groups are divided into smaller groups to go and consolidate or to prepare or to do the practical learning skills. Now, Sir Gideon with me was facilitating or is facilitating still predominantly the educational content, and Dr. Kazim does the practice content for us because we splitted the content. And I'm sure, Tariq, you would appreciate that there are certain practical skills that's important for blended learning. Like this morning, I'm presenting, but it's not only the slides. There's a lot of technical things that happen behind the scene. And if Dr. Vakas, thank you for your support and always being there. There was a lot of practical issues for preparation, and there's still a number of practical issues that happens or technical issues that happens during the lecture. And to teach in blended learning, you need to master certain basic skills to work on the LMS or to work on the Google Suite or on Teams or on Zoom or on Skype. We normally, with the PhD students, where we are less than 6, we work on Skype sometimes. So these are all the explorations that we have done during this last 11 months in order to facilitate learning. So cultivate blended learning competencies through constant refraction, and it's not reflection, it's refraction, because reflection is when you think about, refraction is when you influence. So we ask the blended learners to influence each other on the set. With other words, when they meet in their communities of learning, in their small groups, they influence each other in that sense. Then the last one, and Tariq, if you can focus, is demonstrate a practical competence for blended learning. Now, that one we have even done separate, and we have a separate assessment for practical competence, and the learners must score 90% in order to pass the theoretical module. So we have the theoretical assessments, which is assignments, our online tests, and our presentations, and our very big group and individual assignments, open book tests, and those things. But the learners must also pass the practical exam. So if you do not pass your practical exam with 90%, you are not getting certification. So that is the baseline and Eagle's view, how we have developed the course, but we are still learning because we do constant research. We have a reflective journal, and we also have our pre-test and post-test questionnaire on the set, and we constantly also allow the adult learners to guide us what works for them. Because as I said, we need to be respectful for adult learners. But what we have learned the past time with our adult learners is the first resistance to change or to transform. Then they become part of the process, and the process go quite easier, but we constantly need to hear what their needs is to support them. So before every session, we spend almost 10 minutes just to hear how the learners are. And what we have also learned, and that is from Prof. Kasim in computer sciences, who is also joining the team on and off. He always say that we are not worried when no one responds on the set, because it doesn't mean they do not learn. People learn silently. So we have also bridged that one. Now, what works? I already have gone through this informally. The first one is assessment. Before we even started the blended learning, we assessed the context, and we did a bit of research amongst our consumers, which were adult educators in the health professions and outside. And also assessment, even if you do a small lesson, you need to assess where the adult learners is. Then planning, preparation, resources, and communication. As I said, that a lot went on behind the scene this morning to sit and share with you my experiences of blended learning. Then the implementation and the constant feedback. What really works in blended learning and where we learn faster is constant feedback. Even if it's just a verbal feedback, when you as a facilitator get on the set to give verbal feedback to the learners, that is very important. Adult learners or learners would like to know where they stand. Are they progressing or are they not progressing? Otherwise, they become despondent. So what works is a PI. I used an acronym there. A PI is assessment, assess where you are. And this cycle we need to do constantly in order for learning to take place. The most important thing is that learning is to take place. Now, what is the constant mutual learning that we have learned in blended learning? The first one is internet connectivity. Now, sometimes it's consistent, but intermittent disconnections take place, as you heard earlier on the set that Dr. Vakas made me aware that you cannot see the slides, but from my side, it was crystal clear. So that is very important, and it's very important to have a team member on the set to warn us about this. And also we had situations that one of the team members facilitate, and then all of a sudden the person has got an electricity or a connectivity problem, and that person is off, then the other team member spontaneously take over and complete the lesson. Then long hours of class time. On blended learning, and especially the online session, the synchronous session, we have learned that the longest time that you could be on set is possibly 1.5 hours. Then people becomes redundant, they become very tired. So you need to divide your module or your lesson to such an extent that it's covered in an hour to 1.5 hours. If you have 1.5 hours, it's important to have a change or a break, even if it's just for 3 minutes. Then not too many pre-reading work, I already talked about it. Then lack of competence in technology, and that is both sometimes for us as facilitators as well as for the learners. We need to address that, and we address that in our small groups. Then sometimes questions are not seen while posted to the facilitators. That we also have to manage. And I'm very glad Google Meet has got a hand now where you can see the person if the person wants to pose a question. Then team teaching and group learning, I talked about that. Then collaboration among group mates and master trainers for asynchronous activity. As I said, that you start with a very unwilling team, and sometimes a gross dependency develops on the master trainer, on the group leader, or some of the group members, but we need to manage that group dynamics. But what really pleases us is that most consistent currently, the learning takes place in the learning communities, that is in the small groups. What we do on set is to clarify the difficult concepts, to go into a conversation on what is not understood, or to do certain corrections, or to learn from each other, even as facilitators, to learn from the students. Now, we have a certain commitment as a team, and our commitment is to walk the journey step by step with the adult learner as long as they wish. because for us this is a lifelong excursion, and this is just in a nutshell that I would like to share with you. But the main important thing for us to remember is when you prepare a blended learning lesson, that it must be like a 3-course meal. There must be a starter just to tantalize, there must be the main meal, and then there must be the dessert, so that the person walk off feeling sweet, to feel that I can master this, I can do this. So thank you, colleagues, for walking with me. I have said very little. This is the peak of an iceberg that we as a team are dealing with, but I'm available for any questions, and even after the session, I'm available if you would like to mail me in asking certain questions or in giving certain guidance. I'm also open for learning. So thank you, and thank you especially to Bakas, Dr. Taira, and the Dean of Health Sciences, as well as our Vice Chancellor who invited me on this set. It's honestly an honor to tap into that blended learning education. And a special thank to Prof. Raisa, who literally forced the team to set this together. I don't know whether she's on the set, but even in absentia, I really want to thank her for the support and always being there, because before we rolled out, we went through different sessions in order to test what we have. So thank you, colleagues, for spending this couple of minutes with me.
I think we had a question. Thank you very much, Dr. Iber, for such an insightful talk. The most important thing is that learning should take place. There is a lot of resistance to accept change, and it reminds me of a very, very famous saying that technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. I would now welcome Professor Dr. Alam Sher Malik to share his valuable thoughts with us. Sir, please.
जो है वो सारे पावर पॉइंट जैसे रहते हैं. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon from Malaysia. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Muhammad Iqbal Khan, the Vice Chancellor of Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University, for inviting me to speak on this prestigious forum. Right now, if you can see the screen.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Right. Okay. Now, I think a quite comprehensive presentation has been done on concept of blended learning, and I will try to continue on that. Now, as we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has challenged us to develop a teaching, learning, and assessment methods that can work effectively and efficiently while maintaining the social distancing and avoiding the gatherings of classrooms and examination halls. And this is what Dr. Abel was also addressing. Now, to face this challenge, we need to have certain attributes, and as was mentioned, that the resistance and all those things. But what we need is to face this change. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change, and change we need. The illiterate of 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn we must. Now, what is the solution to this challenge? The use of modern technology to enhance teaching learning while maintaining social distancing and avoiding gatherings. And this led to blended learning. And now we are moving towards blended curriculum. Now, based on this, our learning outcomes, the participants of this webinar will be able to outline the requirements for practicing blended curriculum, propose a contextualized framework to design a blended curriculum, and discuss the assessment format in the blended curriculum. So I will try to cover all these three learning outcomes. First, what is blended learning? The term blended learning is used widely, but not always consistently, and we have seen different definitions of blended learning. The simplest one, blended learning, simply means combining face-to-face, which here I mean the didactic or traditional with digital experiences. Means using digital resources while we are teaching, maybe even through traditional learning. But as we know that now the concept of blended learning is even being applied to online face-to-face teaching. Dr. Abel just mentioned that when we are teaching online, it is a virtual face-to-face. So this means, by this definition, the face-to-face, whether it is in the classroom or it is online or virtual, we must include some digital experiences. For example, use of videos, animations, gamification, or live communication. Now, if that is the concept of blended learning, then what is the blended curriculum? By this definition, we have to have a curriculum which incorporates blended teaching learning approach. And how we do that? For that, we must understand what is curriculum first. Traditionally, or in narrowest form, curriculum includes only content and examination. That's how most of us were trained during our early period. Learning is deemed to result from the assembly and assimilation of long list of facts, and then there is an examination. However, a more forward or modern view of the curriculum puts emphasis on learning outcomes, the teaching learning methods, the subject matter, and its sequencing and assessment. So we can see that there is a very wide coverage comes under the term of curriculum. So these are the 5 aspects of a wider curriculum. On top is the learning outcomes, then is the content, organization of content, learning methods, and then assessment. And then at the end is the evaluation process, which looks at all these 5 aspects. Now, out of these 5, what we need to change to develop a blended curriculum? Learning outcomes, we don't change. Contents, we don't change. Organization of content, yes, we will change the organization of contents. we will change the teaching learning methods, and we will change the assessment methods. This means that in blended curriculum, we do not compromise on our learning outcome and our content, but we find the ways to achieve those outcomes and those goals by reorganization of the content, adopting new teaching methods and new assessment methods. And I will talk about these three one by one. First, organization of content means we need to find out that whatever we want to teach, which part of it that can be taught digitally better. This means developing a right blend between face-to-face and online, also between face-to-face and digital input. So it is important to have a right blend of the face-to-face or traditional teaching and digital input to keep the learners engaged and achieve the optimum results. Blended learning involves the mixing of several delivery techniques. For example, the one I was just mentioning in the beginning, that now we think that because some part we are teaching in the classroom face-to-face, and other we are teaching online, although again face-to-face. So some people might think that this is also a blended learning because we are mixing face-to-face physical and face-to-face virtual. Discovering the right blend, that's very important when we are organizing the content, that we should have the proportionate and appropriate content, what is to be delivered physically face-to-face and what is going to be delivered digitally by using multimedia. So we have to find a balance between offline and online, between synchronous and asynchronous, between text-based and multimedia, between structured and open, what is going to be taught on the campus and what is going to be taught off the campus, and guided learning and self-paced learning. So these are the attributes on both sides, and we have to find the balance in between these two sides. Here is one guide discovering the right blend. If you see, the first column is proportion of content delivered online. Second column, type of course, and third is typical description. In traditional course, of course, there is no content delivered online. Then is a web-based, where actually it is face-to-face traditional teaching, but some things are placed on the web. The third one, which is blended or hybrid, what we are talking today, is there's a wide range from 30 to 80%, means that we can find the right blend for, and there cannot be just one right blend. It might change from situation to situation, from course to course, or even from lesson to lesson. And the final one is where 100% is online. So what we are talking about here is the from 30 to 90% blend. How to achieve this right balance? There are some tips about it. First, we must know the level and familiarity with online facilities, both staff and students, how familiar our teaching staff and how familiar our students are with the use of this technology. And then we look at the content, which part of the content can be delivered best digitally, and which part can be delivered face-to-face physically. Of course, we have to apply principles of adult learning, scaffolding, which Dr. Abel also mentioned, chunking and scaffolding, and that is very important concept that tells us where to intervene and where to wait and see. We have to balance the time between we have to balance the time between the traditional and digital input. We have to combine formal and informal learning, means the measurable and the other skills. We have to build on the strength and medium, a strength of each medium, whether it's a traditional face-to-face and online. We have to use wide spectrum of digital options. We know that there are lots of options, videos and the live communication, etc. Of course, we need to encourage teamwork, and we have to learn from our experience by going through all those 8 points. What we learn, we need to implement on that. Here is another idea of using Bloom's taxonomy rather than for assessment, but for teaching. So using online teaching learning tools according to cognitive levels of Bloom's taxonomy, from remembering to creating, and here is some the suggestions are given that how different modes of or different tools of digital teaching learning can be used for this purpose. That was the organization of the content. Next, which we need to change, is teaching learning methods and teaching learning activities. We know that the blended teaching learning can take place in the classroom, where we include the digital experiences in our traditional lecture. We can do blended teaching learning online, then again synchronous and asynchronous. The synchronous type of teaching learning activities can include a use of videos, simplifying the concepts. We can find a lot of videos even on YouTube by using cartoons that are very complex concepts can be taught by simplifying them. Live activities, interviews, case-based learning. We can interview the patients live, or we can have the simulated patients. We can show the counseling sessions. We can also show the live procedures as a synchronous teaching learning methods. And we often use these gamifications during our interactive lectures, where is what we call is quizzing applications for formal assessment. Asynchronous would use the video recordings of, for example, lectures, interviews, history taking, physical examination procedures. Now, not everybody finds it easy to video record their lectures and share with the students, but for example, what I have been doing is that whenever I give these online sessions, I would record and then that can be shared with the students, both who were able to attend and both who were not able to attend. So if we are teaching online by using whatever software, it's always better to record the session, not only to share with the students, but for our own self-development, that we can go through those recordings and see how we can improve in our teaching. Blended learning can be applied through a whole set of teaching learning methods, whether it's lectures, PBL, team-based learning, case-based learning, student-led seminars, tutorials, for communication skills, and with a limitation, I would say with significant limitations, we can use for clinical teaching and assessment. Implementing the blended learning, it can be face-to-face, as I mentioned, that in the classroom, where it's a physical face-to-face, but using the digital experiences within that. Rotation cycle, but students cycle through a schedule of independent online study and then face-to-face, like what we do is in the classrooms by giving the pre-reading, and students come prepared. What we call is flipped classrooms. Flexible, most of the curriculum is delivered digitally, but facilitators are available on demand or sometimes online to support whatever, if there is any problem. And of course, then is the entire course of being given online. So these are four different modes of implementing blended learning. We have been conducting problem-based learning online quite successfully. Face-to-face and synchronous online tutorial group sessions are comparable in terms of process of problem-based learning. It is useful to organize a face-to-face meeting at least once or twice among these online students, so that helps them to get to know each other. We must identify the supporting sessions that can be delivered online and reach on an agreement on rules for online sessions between students and the lecturers, and make sure the visibility and regular feedback is in online sessions. This is another important point which we have learned along the way, that sometimes the students might come online, they just switch off their audio and video, and the just icon is there on the screen, but student is not there. We can also achieve all the four key principles of student-centered learning in PBL, that is constructive, self-directed, collaborative, and contextual. All these attributes can be achieved through online conduct of PBL. Similarly, we have been conducting very successfully online PBL by using this set of facilities, at least three of them. One is the chatting application like WhatsApp, other quizzing. You can choose any Mentimeter, Kahoot, or Socrative or Quizlet, and one of the video conferencing. So we have been doing that quite successfully. In fact, in some aspects, even better than physical face-to-face. So that was the second aspect of teaching learning methods. The third aspect which we need to change to qualify for blended curriculum is the assessment. The assessment in blended learning, blended curriculum, of course, educators must establish the purpose of assessment first, and the criteria of what is being assessed. It might be slightly different than what is done physically, and identify what are the outcomes we want to achieve from this assessment. Again, we have to create a balance between the requirements of technology, delivery, andragogy, learning styles, and learning outcomes while we are planning the assessment online. Now, assessment online, one suggestion has been very popular these days is the open book or open web format. And the multiple choice questions can also be conducted through this format, or structured essays like modified essay questions can also be conducted through open book or open web format. The other is by giving assignments, literature reviews, reflections. Some aspects of OSPIs and OSCEs are, as I said, with limitations. And then is the e-portfolios. So how to plan an assessment, online assessment before the examination? We must prepare the staff and the students for online method of assessment. It is important that the both staff and the students are familiar and comfortable with this method of assessment. And during the exam, we should try to use the original materials and not copied from the internet or YouTube, because students might be familiar with those resources. And after the exam, this is an important aspect, that we compare the results with formative or ongoing assessment of the students. We should see whether this online assessment tallies with the ongoing assessment, because if there is a wide difference, that might indicate some flaws in online method of assessment. We must check for plagiarism. And this is another good suggestions, that for outliers, means those who have extremely good results, or those who have poor results online, are those who could not complete the assessment because of internet problem or electricity problems. So we can conduct an online assessment for this group of students. The component of assessments would be same as in the traditional or physical methods: cognitive, psychomotor, affective domain. It would be written, practical or OSPE, clinical or OSCE, viva, and oral presentation. Now, please remember, we are talking about blended curriculum, which includes physical and online. So that does not mean that when I'm saying the practical OSPE or clinical OSCE, I'm saying that all these would be conducted online, because the blended curriculum would have both online and physical contact. Of course, then is the viva or oral presentation, and this is also recommended by Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. Then is the PPD and E, which is personal professional development and ethics, which includes ethics, lifelong learning skills, evidence-based medicine, communication skills, teamwork, and entrepreneurship, etc. Written examination, here is a proposal which we have used with some success. For example, if we want to do the multiple choice questions or modified essay questions, especially for multiple choice questions, we can divide the students in groups of 20 to 25 members, assign an invigilator for these online students, and then if you are using Zoom, for example, you can ask to on the camera, and they should unmute, and they should be clearly visible and audible. And then we project the question online, and the students have already been given a Google form, and they have to answer the questions in a very limited time, let's say 90 seconds or so. And after that, the student must press the submit button to record their answer. So this limits the possibility of copying from somewhere, because there would be a very limited time for that. And after, let's say, first question, 90 seconds, we move on to the next question, our next set of questions. So that is one way of getting written examination online. And during this examination, we can add videos, images, or sounds to our questions, and our extended matching, or modified essay questions, and ask the students to record their responses. And then, of course, there would be automatic marking of MCQs. Now, this is a kind of homegrown method, but of course we know that there are lot of other software available on which can be used, and I will give a list of that in a short while. The written examination can also be conducted as an open book or open web approach, and has been recommended by Higher Education Commission of Pakistan as well. But of course, it needs training of both staff and students, and then we must avoid the resources available on the internet, and we must check for plagiarism. Assignments can be given and can be submitted online. Projects can be conducted, and literature reviews can be conducted by giving some kind of assignments or literature reviews for which straight answers are not available easily, like looking for different kinds of vaccines for malaria, or nowadays we are talking about COVID and SARS-CoV coronavirus 2 vaccines against that. These are some of the free online examination softwares which we can try and use, and of course with some experience we can improve on using these softwares. For example, the last one, exam.net, can be used successfully if we are going for essay type of questions. I think that was my last slide in this, but I must leave you with one word of caution, that do not change the curriculum to suit for blended teaching learning. Our priority is not blended learning. Our priority still is the curriculum and the outcome. And we should use blended teaching only to enhance the curriculum and not to replace or change the curriculum. With that, I just want to share this. I was looking into the literature to find out some material on the blended curriculum. There were not many papers, but I found this one published in 1935. Very interesting. But at that time, the concept of blended learning was that what they did was they combined the kind of a problem where they were looking into the economics, the history, fine arts, and English and sociology, and they combined it into a single situation, single problem, and called it a blended learning. I think it was an excellent idea at that time, but this paper tells us that they did not use this for disciplines where skills are needed. For example, medicine, they couldn't use this. I think with that, I thank you for your attention, and also for the organizing committee and the Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University for giving me this opportunity to talk to such a prestigious group of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I'll be
sir.
glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, sir. We highly appreciate your participation. It was surely an enlightening experience for all of us. Before we move to the participant questions, I would like to inform that we have already shared attendance and feedback form in the chat box. CME points will be given once you fill them up and submit your feedback. Thank you. We have so many questions from the participants, but because of the time restriction, we'll just pick up few questions. And there are a few questions Professor Abel Pinar has already answered in the chat box. Professor Dr. Alam, I have a question. How credit hours are calculated in blended curriculum?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
How credit hours are calculated in blended curriculum? Credit hours.
At the moment, we are using online teaching as one method of teaching. So let's say if either we are giving that session physically in the classroom, or we are giving the same session online, still face to face, they would be counted equally. Actually, we have a guidelines given by the Malaysian Medical Council in this aspect, and but generally it is at the moment it is being considered just another method of delivery. So the credit hours would remain the same.
Thank you, sir. My next question is from Professor Dr. Abel Pinar. Can you elaborate on possible challenges associated with blended learning, please?
Sorry, there was just a delay in the internet. Possible challenges. I think the first challenge that you have in blended learning is the two things in the developing countries, which is electricity and connectivity. Now, I've noted that in Pakistan, connectivity is not that bad, but when you move to the African continent, the connection becomes very versatile. It means that it's not that good all the time. So those are the first things, connectivity. The second thing is that we as facilitators want to take face-to-face lecturing and all those things onto blended learning. And the main important thing that we must tell ourselves is that people only have got this much of concentration time on a set, especially synchronous, and we must develop a process that accommodate learning still. As Prof. Alam said, that learning must take place. It doesn't matter how, whether you are online or in blended learning. So the second thing is we as facilitators or educators resistance to change our approaches in order to accommodate the students. And the third one is, and I'll end there, is a lot of times the resistance of especially adult learners to want to come on board or to learn certain technologies or strategies to learn during blended learning. And the biggest thing to do, as Professor Elam also said in his presentation, is to unlearn and to relearn. Those are the biggest things to do. So I'll stop at that three, because that three are the main challenges within a blended learning.
May I share one really interesting situation? Because this COVID thing came very suddenly, and we were not prepared for blended learning and online. So suddenly we have to change. And interestingly, it was such a pressure that there was no resistance at all, because you don't have any other choice but to teach online. So either you have a session or you don't have a session. So maybe I was thinking at that time that in a situation, an emergency situation like this, people can adopt really very quickly.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Professor Alam, I have a question. Is there a difference between blended learning and hybrid learning, or other terms like being used, virtual learning? This is from Dr. Maruf.
Yeah, actually, at the moment, the word or term blended learning is the most popular term which is being used. The term blended curriculum is not really a quite common term which is being used, because at the moment the blended learning or online learning is just being used as a method, although there is a theoretical basis to support like the community of learners. There is a theory to support online, but at the moment, mainly main term is blended learning, and as the classical definition which I mentioned was, it's use of digital resources. That is the primary requirement. So whether you are doing face-to-face physically or face-to-face online, but using digital resources is an important aspect.
Thank you so much, sir. It was an honor being among such accomplished individuals this morning. I would now request Dr. Professor Muhammad Iqbal Khan for his closing remarks.
I need to thank the speakers. First, particularly Professor Alam Sher for his contribution, and he is always willing to contribute, never say no. And this is his probably his strength and weakness both. And Professor Ebel, and I also thank the participants. Among the participants are some of the very prominent scholars, apart from our deans of all the faculties and the professors of Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University, all the other departments. We have Professor Najibul Haq with us from Peshawar Medical College. We have Professor Saida Kausan, Chairperson, Institute of Medical Education at Sindh Medical University. And we have Professor N.A. Khan Nazir Ahmed Khan from Sindh Medical University. We have Professor Tariq Mufti from Rahman Medical College, and several other very prominent scholars from all over the country. And we have participants from South Africa and from Malaysia as well. With this, I will request all the participants and everyone who is concerned about the medical education that we are not going to return back to the pre-COVID area probably. It is unlikely to return back to pre-COVID area. We need transformative changes, and we need to understand what changes we require in a delivery system as well as in our curriculum, and what we need to understand the limitations of the technologies as well, and where it is possible to adopt the learning methods, digital learning methods as soon as it's possible. It is an extended reality. We cannot avoid that. And therefore, probably a middle ground will be required in future for future learning in medical education, also curriculum development and assessment as well. We need to fine tune our integration as well, the digital as well as the traditional one. We need in institutional collaborations between the different institutions, and we need a national collaboration in Pakistan and abroad, and we need an international collaboration as well. As far as the clinical learning is concerned, Shifa is pioneer in developing e-clinics and virtual clinics in Shifa International Hospital. And recently, our JCI survey was conducted virtually, and this is an example of real virtual world. So how the survey, comprehensive survey was conducted in inspections by the inspectors sitting abroad somewhere in Dubai and United States and other places. They inspected Shifa International Hospitals, each and everything. So this virtual reality, we whether we like it or we don't like, we need to adopt it over the period of time. So we need to develop educational scholarship. This is very important, and Shifa Tameer-e-Millat University is going to lead to develop a diploma programs in e-learning. Inshallah, in very near future, our Department of Education is going to develop a diploma program for e-learning as a broad e-learning program that will be applicable to medical education and all the other health professional education system as well. This is the need of the time that our faculty should be trained how to deliver e-learning, how to cope with the digital revolution. Then I would say there are always ethical considerations. and we need to look into the ethical consideration. Several ethical questions have been arose over the period of time by the use of digital resources, and these ethical questions are still not answered, and we need to, the educationists need to sit down and need to solve all those ethical questions as well. And at the end, we need to develop certain benchmarks. There should be global benchmarks which should be there for delivering on online delivery systems as well as the face-to-face. So this quality assurance is very important. But if we don't go by the quality assurance benchmarks, then probably the standardization of the education will not be possible. With this, I thank you once again. I thank my faculty, this particularly the medical, the health sciences faculty, and the other faculties and all the participants, my own the faculty, professors, and the teachers, and everyone and students who have been participated. With this, I will request our deans to conclude the session with dua, inshallah.
Thank you very much, sir. Before I offer the 3 verses of dua, as our legend Professor Amin would say, I would just add one line that we were already on the path of developing our curriculum for the year 2021. And with this session, I think we feel honored that we got a good guidance from the 2 very able and the best educationists. And definitely our curriculum committee is going to get a lot of guidance from that. And thank you very much. And probably all other medical colleges who have joined in this webinar will also get the same guidance. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Thank you very much. Thanks all.
Thank you, Alim Shah Sahab. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.